Thank you so much for attending this very important talk, perhaps the most important talk of all day, I will say. We had some words this morning from the mayor of Mexico City about the challenges with water here, but what we have gathered for this panel is a terrific group of people dealing with their own challenges with water in different parts of the world with slightly different solutions that I think are really interesting across the board. So we'll get straight into it. We have too many people, too little time, and I will have you introduce yourselves, tell us where you're from and the challenges that you've been facing.
Sure. Well, I'm Lauren McLean. I serve as the mayor of Boise, Idaho. We are a city that's a high desert city nestled in between foothills of the Rockies, have a river running through it, and we are the most isolated city of our size in our country. Our challenges, like cities around the country, around the world, are that we want to make sure that as one of the fastest growing cities in the United States, that we're prepared for a climate-constrained future, and that we can have ensure that we're set up for economic opportunity for our residents. And water is a big part of that. We don't own or operate our drinking water system, but we look to our water renewal system, a lot of people call it the sewer system, for solutions for the future.
Thank you so much. I'm Engineer Nahashon Muguna, responsible for provision of water and sewerage services in Nairobi, Kenya. Nairobi is a city of around 5 million people. Water supply is provided by a company which is owned by the county government of Nairobi. The way it is in Kenya, we have two levels of governance, the national and the county government. So the county government is the second tier of governance and is the owner of the company which manages water and sewerage services. Now, the city has been experiencing water supply problems. The city is only able to produce around 59% of the water demand. The water demand is around 900,000 cubic meters, and what the installed production capacity can be able to achieve is 525,000 cubic meters of water per day. Thank you so much.
Yo voy a hablar en español primero, así que si quieren.
I'm going to speak in Spanish, so if you want to put on headphones. My name is Mauricio Zunino. I am the mayor of Montevideo, Uruguay, a city that, until a few years ago, to talk about water crisis in Uruguay sounded like utopian and really strange, especially taking into account the density in terms of water, both subterranean as well as superficial. But as of 2 years ago, we had a crisis, a pretty significant one, with the supply system. And this also has to do with the climate change processes that we've been undergoing. And as the mayor of Montevideo, we had to generate policies to see how we could supply the water, especially in the most vulnerable areas and the most vulnerable household, access to drinking water when we were in the middle of a crisis. So that also leads us to think that this, which was something that we hadn't foreseen or rare for Montevideo, in effect, today it prepares us to think about investments in the medium and long-term, preventive actions and mitigating actions that we're going to have to implement. I said that Montevideo has about 1.4 million inhabitants. Okay, I introduced myself.
Gracias. So, I mean, we're all sharing this warming climate. We're having these droughts that are exacerbating. We are finding different solutions to this, though. What tools are at our disposal in these different parts of the world? I'm particularly interested in yours. I've written before about water purification. The technology being to the point now where it comes out so pure when you're treating wastewater that you have to put minerals back into it or it's unhealthy. It's this really fascinating technology. You're not doing potable, but talk to us about how you're deploying this technology.
Sure, and I want to step back just a tiny bit because our job, our city's desire is to prevent crisis, and so we're looking at preparing for a more resilient future and looking to solutions to prevent crisis in the long run. And so we actually went to the people. We said, these are the likely challenges, these are some solutions that we have, and we had conversations throughout the city, thousands of conversations to get feedback on a plan that we created, our Water Renewal Resource Plan. Sent it to the ballot. We did a $570 million bond that was for clean water and climate action, and about 82% of Boise residents said yes. And with that approval, we were able then to get real about a water recycling program. Because we don't have our drinking water, we knew we couldn't do it there. But so we looked at how we could actually work in partnership, ultimately, provide solutions to companies that are looking for climate hedges and climate resilience as well, and wanted a clean water solution for their manufacturing. So with that bond approval, we've actually purchased land. The last year and a half, we've been doing a pilot in the parking lot of Micron Corporation in cooperation with the University of Idaho, so water specialists. We even give tours to the public of this facility to look at how it works. We're tracking data. We are touring the public, and we're tweaking the system. And now we've purchased the land and have started building the facility that will take, dirty water and recycle it super clean in a way that we can actually then provide it to fabs and other manufacturing facilities or industrial facilities. So our drinking water that's privately held by Veolia can be there to drink, and we can take dirty water, make it really clean, and provide it for jobs.
This is actually a really interesting through line to what you all are doing here, which is the engagement with the public. You can't go about deploying these solutions without talking to the people first. And Muguna and Mauricio, I think maybe if you wanted to talk here about the ways that you organized people around water usage, and going from there, going forward, are you engaging more with the public as the world generally tends to dry out?
No, thank you so much. Now, as I said, the demand of water is quite high compared to the supply. So what we did is we divided the city into 4 corridors so that we can be able to channel water particular hours to various customers along the 4 corridors. Now, within a week, we are able to pressurize every corridor properly so that people can get enough water to store in their houses and use that water. Now, the water in the city lands into 4 locations. So we modeled it based on the major arteries, major pipelines, which distribute water in the city. And we prepared a program which we normally call Equitable Water Distribution. This program was given to the customers. They were informed how we shall be operating the systems. So every customer knows the day they are supposed to receive their water, the hours they are supposed to receive the water. And we make sure we follow that program so that the day you are supposed to have water, you have water in your house. And it has really worked because of communicating to the customers. We keep on communicating with the customers. If there is any breakdown, we communicate to them, telling them this particular day you won't have water. We won't be able to change the program. We don't give you the water this particular day. And it has really worked because if you come to Nairobi, you won't realize there is not enough water because you won't see a tanker easily. The city lands well, but it is based on that equitable distribution program. Now, again, in the areas where the customers, most vulnerable customers live, we ensure they get water 24/7 to avoid breakdown of any waterborne diseases. When I'm talking about the less fortunate people, it's the informal settlements where the poor lives in the city. So we ensure those areas get water 24/7. The areas where most of you live, we make sure they get less water because you can be able to have storage capacities within your compounds. People who live in apartments, again, we make sure we take adequate water to those apartments, the hours they are supposed to be getting the water. And as I've said, it really works for us. Now, what are we doing to solve that problem? Because of the way the structures of water and governance in the country are, the national government is responsible for the development of water sources and development. And it has taken over 25 years before the last water source was developed. That's back 1997. We are now in 2024. You can imagine the population growth. For the water which we are using to serve the city was supposed to serve the city up to the year 2000. After 2000, we were supposed to develop new sources, but that has not been done. It is in the process of being done. Very soon, we are going to be commissioning new systems to hand additional water to the city of around 160,000 cubic meters per day, which will just bridge the gap. So regional or equitable water distribution will still continue to be applied to the city residents of Nairobi. Thank you so much.
Bien. En lo que a nosotros un poco respecta,
What we, as far as we're concerned, as the mayor of Montevideo and we're not in charge of the water supply system. When there's a lack of supply after 3 years of a drought and so on, what we saw is that the mayor had to act, the mayor's office, in terms of what we were going to do about the distribution, especially with having a format of bottled water that was brought in from elsewhere and distributed in the most vulnerable households. That was a bit of the plan, and which shows to a point you can see on the slide, which has to do with some of the distributions that we were doing in Montevideo. And this we were able to do it because we had other plans, some other plans that didn't have to do with the water, but helped us to see where to channel it. One is the open data plan, which we have, and the localization, the socioeconomic characterization of the population. So we could see where there were the most socioeconomical and health vulnerable. And this enabled us to move forward as to where to channel the water. The second thing were work tables or round tables that we could talk about with the residents, the possibility of moving forward with these actions. So when we talked about how to distribute the water, a water distribution process, where would you put the priority? How did you work this priority? You had the data, and in addition, you had the panels or the tables that enabled you to know where to channel it, to which households, to which houses, and that's how distribution system worked. And this enabled us to be much more efficient in terms of distribution, especially the immediate distribution, so that this thing about the water wouldn't become, or the crisis in the supply of drinking water would not become a sanitary or health crisis because of this process. So to have the data and have the space where, in effect, we talk about with the residents, and then we distribute that power, we distribute the water based on those conversations.
And speaking of distribution, I was curious also about maybe any other infrastructural changes that you are considering. I'm a big fan of sponge cities, this idea that you build out green infrastructure that soaks up water into underlying aquifers, beyond treating wastewater. Are there ways both on a city scale that we can do more green spaces, but also on maybe a household scale with rain catchment systems, so we can just lessen the demand on the water infrastructure to begin with?
Well, what we've looked at in Boise is, and in my mind, it all goes back to people. Our residents want us to lead. They know, and so often they're ahead of politicians on understanding and wanting to see resiliency measures taken. We have a climate action plan, and our clean water work is a big part of that. But we're also looking at, as you mentioned, nature-based solutions. So I'll talk about that probably over the household part of the question. We have as a goal to double our tree canopy by 2030. That'll cool the neighborhood. It doesn't necessarily impact water, but in addition to doubling the tree canopy in our city by 2030, we've committed and actually already completed planting seedlings up in the national forest above our city. It's a headwater strategy. So planting 235,000 seedlings in the national forest above our city to protect water quality, water habitat as it comes downstream. Because in addition to groundwater, we rely on surface water. So looking at that, and have really partnered and called on our residents not only to help us meet our climate action goals, of course, but to take as many measures as they can themselves, while also participating in the work that we're doing to expand our water renewal system. One of my favorite parts is I really believe that if we're going to get residents to take action, I don't have all the tools that a lot of cities have in a Dillon Rule state, but if we're going to partner with residents and get them to take action, we've got to engage them from the beginning. And as I mentioned early, engagement to get to the point where we had a plan and success and buy-in from residents was key. But when we started this water pilot project, I actually had to meet the mayor out at this facility. It was one of the hottest days we'd had in the summer. Our days are getting hotter, so it was over 100 degrees in a parking lot in metal containers. I show up, and I thought nobody in their right mind is actually going to make the drive and come out here. I had about 35 residents show up that wanted to learn about water recycling and also wanted to learn about what they could do at home, moms with babies, college students, residents, retirees, a whole plethora of folks that want to be part of the solution. We're curious about what we're doing. We're taking that interest and turning it into individualized action while also connecting them with volunteer opportunities to help with our nature-based solutions that we have both in the headwaters and in restoring natural lands in our parks throughout our city.
We have a little over a minute left. My apologies. If you had some final thoughts there about additional infrastructure before we close out.
No, thank you so much. As I said, the government is investing heavily in development of new water sources for the city. And notwithstanding that, we, as the county government, we encourage the people to use low volume systems. Instead of the 9-liter, you use the 6-liter systems. Also, we inform the customers or the residents on water saving tips, avoiding using learning tabs, avoiding learning showers, so that they can use as little as possible to avoid, so that your neighbor also can get water. And then also we encourage them to not water their glasses a lot, those who have big compounds. So we encourage people to save water a lot until when we get adequate water, when the new sources are developed. But notwithstanding the climate change, the investments are actually very heavy because at the moment you cannot tap the water direct from the rivers or running rivers. You must do dams so that you can be able to take care of the climate changes. These days, every 4 years, you find the river flows going down tremendously, so they cannot be able to sustain the obstructions of low water to your treatment plants. Thank you so much.
You want to close this out? Yeah.
Sí, muy rápido, pues ya sé que estamos.
Well, very quickly, because I know that we're short on time. Well, I think what we have to do is to think about 2 temporary phases, to think mitigating actions as a government that address the climate change and the water issue as one of the main issues that have to do with climate change, and to think about dynamics that will be more long-term and that will enable us to implement those structural solutions in order to be able to have a dynamic, a much more sustainable daily dynamic, and that we don't have to have panels like this on water crisis at these events, but rather we can say how we solve these issues, and I think that's what our duty, that's our task. Thank you.
Lovely, positive way to close it. Thank you very much. Thank you.